Hello, so today I want to talk a bit about when you don't believe that you have an eating disorder. Okay, so I've been reading a bit about this experience recently and trying to make sense of it because I always wonder what I would say to someone if, like, for example, a parent or a friend or someone said to me, hey, I think my friend's got an eating disorder and I'm not sure what I should do. And honestly, I don't know either. Like, I've had an eating disorder, I've been through treatment, I'm now in this place where I'm now in a really good place in my recovery, and I do not know what the answer to that question would be. I've thought about it a lot. What would have helped me when I was struggling with my eating disorder? What could someone have said that would have helped me believe that I was unwell and that I needed help and I needed to change what I was doing? And I think first of all it's important to clear up a few myths around eating disorders, which is that, well, despite what I look like, so obviously I really meet the stereotype of someone with someone who struggled with anorexia, and I would encourage you to follow people who do not meet the stereotype. Especially for people who want to learn more about eating disorders, I think it's really important to get an understanding from different perspectives. So from people who have eating disorders and live in a large body, for people of colour who also have eating disorders, for people who are males and also have eating disorders, because there is the stereotype that people, particularly people with anorexia, are going to be white, they're going to be female, and they're going to be really naturally slim. Might be like that and have an eating disorder, but you could also be different. Like, eating disorders affect lots of different people with different backgrounds, and you do not need to be white and female and naturally genetically slim to have or to struggle with an eating disorder. So I think that's the first important thing to be aware of for people, for everyone really, because eating disorders affect anyone. It's important to be open to that, whether you struggle with an eating disorder or whether you might come across someone who's struggling with an eating disorder. It's important to be mindful that no matter where you are or who you're interacting with, there could be someone who's struggling, and you might never know that that is the case. Mental illnesses, eating disorders included, are invisible for the most part. I started reading about this anosognosia, I think it's called in the literature, that that people with eating disorders tend to have, where they are not aware that they are unwell, or they might outright deny it, they don't believe it. Reading this master's thesis which explained why this might come about, and I'll reference it below, and she said that for people with eating disorders, what might start out as a goal-directed action to eat in a certain way, to eat certain foods, to eat less of something, over time becomes habitual. And so whereas people without eating disorders might engage in disordered eating behaviours, those behaviours for people without eating disorders take some kind of conscious effort to engage in, whereas for people with eating disorders it doesn't require conscious effort to continue engaging in those behaviours because it's become habitual. And unlike for people who, for example, might be dieting, where doing the behaviour is unpleasant or unenjoyable, but then they enjoy the result, for people with eating disorders, the behaviour itself provides some kind of relief or a sense of power, which is of course ironic because actually it's a habit that we don't have power over. People with eating disorders don't initially believe that they have an eating disorder because they think that they are in control of what they're doing because perhaps it started out that way. And of course it feels kind of good, and so we continue those behaviors thinking that maybe it's good to do them. And she also said that there are probably examples of this outside of the eating disorder realm where people engage in habits that are actually unhelpful to them and they're not aware of that they're doing it. When I'm going to bed at night, it's really easy to pick up my phone and scroll through Instagram or the news or do some random Google search instead of lying in bed and trying to go to sleep. And I know that scrolling through Instagram really hinders me from falling asleep. The blue light, the stimulation, it keeps me up, it makes it harder to fall asleep. But I have to make a conscious effort not to do that because it's quick stimulation, and I guess in the moment it feels good, and it has become habitual over time that I would look at my phone and scroll through it before I go to sleep, and now I have to make a conscious decision not to do that. But it's hard. Not as hard as trying to overcome an eating disorder, but that's maybe an example of even when you know you have a habit that is not helpful for you, you continue to engage in it, and I know that a lot of people do. So I read that thesis, which was very interesting, but it still didn't help me with answering my question which I had at the beginning, which is how do you actually help someone who isn't aware that they're sick? And my counsellor in the past said that deep down you know if you're sick, and I don't know if that is true or not. When I was initially in my eating disorder, I don't think there was a definitive part of me that knew I was sick. I think there were parts of me that didn't like what I was doing, there were parts of me that thought maybe this is a bit unhealthy, but I don't think there was a definitive part of me that thought I have an eating disorder. I guess I didn't feel, even for me as a white straight female, I didn't feel like I met the stereotype of someone with an eating disorder, because in those days I was not emaciated like you see on TV or in films or something like that, and so I thought I didn't have an eating disorder, I didn't look like that, there was no way. Other indicators that I had an eating disorder were there. I exercised too much to the detriment of my health and mental well-being. I restricted my food, although that was not a conscious decision. It just came naturally to me that I would try to eat less, and I wouldn't eat certain things. I was scared of gaining weight. I think if you have any of those indicators, if you're thinking about food lots, if you're obsessing over food, if you think that food has some kind of moral value, like you're better if you eat this food and you're worse if you eat that food, then it's likely that you are struggling with an eating disorder. And unfortunately, in all the literature that I was reading, none of it helped me understand what would be the best thing to say to someone who you think might be struggling with an eating disorder. And so all I can think of is my own experience and what I think would have helped me. And I know what didn't help me. What didn't help me was people who commented on my weight. Like, just don't talk about weight. What did help me was someone, my sister, who was brave and said, you know, you seem to exercise a lot, you seem to not eat certain things, have you thought about whether maybe you have an eating disorder? And of course my response was no. But she planted the seed, and so then I could continue to think about it, do some research on my own, and yeah, eventually we reached the same conclusion. Another approach that I think could help as well is simply asking, how are you doing mentally? Like, taking time, being patient, and asking genuinely, how are things going for you? How are you feeling? Because people with eating disorders generally lack self-awareness in that they think a lot about others, but they don't think about themselves and how they are feeling. And I remember when I had an eating disorder, it was all go, 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 thinking about the next meal, the next, you know, what I was cooking that night, blah, 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 when I would exercise, blah, blah, blah. But actually having someone stop me and just talk and, you know, help me to understand, just showing compassion. And what has come through in some of the literature is that some people with eating disorders are really longing for a sense of connection. I don't have the answer, and I'm really interested to hear what you think. Like, what would you say to someone who you think might have an eating disorder, or what would you recommend that someone say to someone who they think might have an eating disorder? Because it's a really difficult conversation to have. Coming from a place of compassion is really important, coming from a place of asking questions and just wanting to learn more about what the person is going through and how you can help, maybe doing some online research as well, but also recognizing that every person's experience is unique as well, that this person might have a mental illness, but the person is not the mental illness. So don't treat the person really differently just because they might be struggling. Okay, so I was just editing this video and I need to add a couple of things. Okay, one, if you are wondering if what you're doing is healthy, or if you're exercising too much, if you're eating too little, if you're not eating enough, if you're wondering, like if there's a little part of you that is wondering, then I think that's an indicator enough that you should seek help and ask someone else what they think, and preferably someone who's objective, preferably a counsellor or a GP, or someone that you have, someone who is maybe not a family member or a friend in this case, so that they can be a bit more objective and not just say what you might want to hear. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, I know that in the eating disorder community there's this whole idea of sick enough and encouraging people to seek help because they deserve help, and that is totally true. There is no such thing as losing enough weight to qualify as having an eating disorder or something like that. There is a problem within our medical system where there are certain tick boxes to meet the criteria of having a label of certain eating disorders, and that is a failure of our system. It's not anything to do with you. And if you are struggling, no matter how severe or how not severe, minimal, I can't think of the opposite word, you deserve help. You don't have to get worse before you can get better. And thirdly, this video has been really focused on the label of an eating disorder, and listening to it I'm like, but the label
It doesn't even matter. What matters is if you have a healthy relationship with food and exercise and your body or not. And if you don't, then yeah, you should seek help and try to change that, because life is so much better when food is just food, when you accept your body and you're not afraid of weight gain, and when you have a healthy relationship with movement. So regardless of whether you meet some DSM criteria for an eating disorder or not, if you don't have a good relationship with food or exercise or your body, if it's making you feel a bit distressed, a bit upset, then seek help. You deserve help, as I said before. And I know that some people won't have access to that, and again, that is another failure of our current society. But if you do have access, then please utilize that privilege. And finally, fourthly, is another thing that you can do as a friend or family member is to model a healthy relationship with food and exercise and your body, because that has a big impact. It really does. So I don't have time in this video to go into what that means, but there are other videos and links that will explain that. But basically, showing body acceptance, body neutrality is really helpful. Eating whatever, whenever, responding to your body's hunger, your mental and physical hunger is really helpful, and not over-exercising is very helpful as well. Just doing movement that you enjoy, or if you don't enjoy movement, then not moving. Like, modeling is really helpful as well. Okay, that's all.
So this video is obviously getting long again because I've just blabbed on, not really knowing what I'm talking about, but I'd be really interested in your opinions. So if you have any of them, please feel free to comment or send me an email or message me on Instagram or some other means. Okay, I'm gonna stop recording now. I hope that you are keeping safe and well, and I'm sending you lots of love. Thanks for watching. Bye.